I actually like Transformers Age of Extinction.
He's broken. Fantastic.
I'd like to think I'm not, but I have always had a soft spot for this movie. It's fun, it does somewhat pull at the heartstrings at times, and it tries to do something the previous Transformers films didn't through the incorporation of man-made Transformers, which in my opinion was enough to make this movie stand out. And look, I very much understand why many don't like this film, because a lot of the times I find it extremely frustrating too. In fact, I don't think it comes anywhere close to the likes of Transformers 1 or Dark of the Moon, which I really do believe are the best Transformers films. But with that being said, I do wholeheartedly think this movie is overhated and gets more right than it's given credit for. So let's have that conversation. So over the past week or so, I've dedicated some time to rewatching the Transformers films, with the exception of one obviously.
I can't do it. I can't do it.
And I have to be honest with you guys, I don't enjoy Age of Extinction nearly as much as I used to, unfortunately. But one of many things I do still love about this movie is the way it builds on Dark of the Moon, because watching the two of them back to back, it's really noticeable just how seamlessly the two films tie into one another. I mean, with the events of the previous trilogy culminating with the Battle of Chicago, it always felt like it was only a matter of time before the humans really took matters into their own hands. And Dark of the Moon actually laid the groundwork for a really interesting concept, which I was glad Age of Extinction decided to explore, somewhat at least. Right from the beginning of the movie, we're introduced to the idea that forceful action is being taken against all Transformers, including the Autobots.
A swift act of Congress put an end to all joint operation between the military and the Autobots.
And I think that goes back to the idea that humanity put their trust in the Autobots, and now in a way they're suffering the consequences of Sentinel Prime's betrayal.
All Autobots are being hunted.
I lost a sister in Chicago. You get no sympathy from me.
I found this whole concept pretty interesting, because you can sort of understand humanity's attempt to rid the world of all Transformers. I mean, simply looking at the level of destruction that ensued across the previous 3 movies, it makes narrative sense that the general public is terrified, regardless of whether a Transformer claims to be an Autobot or Decepticon. At the same time, the way humanity goes about this is one of the film's biggest strengths in my opinion, because it takes an undeniably reasonable motivation and twists it into pure corruption. So at the heart of this film are KSI, a sort of giant tech company who post Dark of the Moon have exploited the
spoils of war.
And to preface, I'm not a big fan of human involvement in Transformers films, because more often than not, they just take away from what we watch the movie for. However, with that being said, I do gravitate towards how they were used in this movie, specifically KSI and Cemetery Wind, because they allowed the movie to temporarily shift away from the Autobot vs Decepticon narrative we'd become accustomed to, and create a unique almost three-way dynamic with the Autobots trapped right in the middle. I mean, on one hand you had Cemetery Wind, led by Howard Attinger, who was primarily motivated by paranoia and greed, and their job was to almost hunt down any and all Transformers, all whilst working with Lockdown to help him track Optimus Prime. On the other hand, you had Joshua Joyce at KSI, who represented a sort of corporate hubris, thinking he can play God and commercialize alien technology, while selling stakes in his company based on the promise of a constant supply of dead Transformers. And you know what I found captivating about these intertwined dynamics? Is that they put the Autobots in a uniquely precarious situation we hadn't seen them in before. Optimus Prime and Joshua Joyce's confrontation was a great example of this, and dare I say, the most emotional moment in the movie. Now the score in this scene is a huge reason why it lands so emotionally, but beyond the soundtrack, it's the personal heartbreak that I think really gets me. I don't know, there's something about seeing Optimus Prime's deep faith in humanity actively used against him and completely dismissed.
The world will know what you're doing here.
The world? The world will approve. We can make you now. We don't need you anymore.
That was cruel.
And after everything he sacrificed for Earth, watching him realize that his belief in humans was repaid with cold-blooded betrayal is genuinely heartbreaking. The concept of KSI's man-made Transformers also gave way to this ethical debate that I wish was explored a hell of a lot more.
That's company property! They're not your property.
Because when the film does briefly hone in on this subplot,
just metal. That's what I always thought of them.
And they're not. They're living things.
It arguably delivers some of the most interesting ideas in the movie, Joyce, who feels very reminiscent of modern tech CEOs, sees what he's doing as evolution and innovation as opposed to desecration, and he's so blinded by the technical achievement and the massive potential for his business that he completely ignores the fact that his raw materials were living sentient beings who bled to protect Earth, whilst Optimus Prime and the Autobots see KSI's operation for what it truly is, an exploitation of their race.
They were my friends.
And to be honest, I was left pretty disappointed when Megatron was revealed to be the mastermind behind the human-made Transformers all along, as it somewhat felt like everything was gearing up for the humans to be main antagonists driven by corporate greed and paranoia. And Galvatron's role, whatever that was, ended up diluting the boiling tensions that had been naturally brewing between the Autobots and humans. Now, one of the most common criticisms that I hear directed at Transformers in the Bayverse is that they lack any sort of personality.
Oh, hell no!
Which has always baffled me, especially in relation to this film, because amongst all of its flaws, if Age of Extinction does anything right, it's the way it portrays the Transformers. You see, whenever one of the Autobots is on screen, the best praise I can give the movie in terms of how they're handled is, I'm never bored. And that's not to say I was bored with the Transformers in the previous 3 films, far from it. But in addition to new characters like Drift, Crosshairs and Hound, who are all really memorable in their own ways, I specifically like the sides of Bumblebee and Optimus Prime that the narrative brings out. Because again, going back to the introduction of KSI's man-made Transformers, we're shown a side to both of them that we may not have seen had this concept not been implemented. The thing with Bumblebee is he's always been the somewhat childlike expressive Autobot, but that trait gets hilariously exacerbated here.
I hate cheap knockoffs.
You get this almost, and rightfully so, petty, competitive and jealous side of him when he's introduced to Stinger, who's essentially KSI's attempt at building a sleek, superior version of him. And like many things in Age of Extinction, this rivalry between Stinger and Bumblebee could have been explored much more. But regardless, I like the fact that it does a great job of accentuating a more petty side of Bumblebee, which I personally found really effective and funny. Optimus Prime's reaction on the other hand, oh boy.
I have sworn to never kill humans, but when I find out who's behind this, he's going to die.
I'm 99% sure this is my favourite on-screen portrayal of Optimus Prime. Not only is the design absolutely peak.
What?
Yeah, I have to say I've just always liked the new designs that they went for in this film, particularly Optimus Prime's. But aesthetics aside, the version of Optimus that the narrative brings out is really compelling. He feels very fallible in this movie, because whereas in the previous films, you never once doubted where he stood with his morals and humanity.
Can I take them out? Ironhide, you know we don't harm humans.
In Age of Extinction, that same moral certainty has been completely shattered. And I'd argue this depiction of Optimus Prime makes a hell of a lot of sense when you take into consideration that he's processing 1, the betrayal of Sentinel Prime.
What your leaders say is true. This was all my fault.
And 2, which is the biggest one in this film, the subsequent betrayal of the humans against his own kind.
They slaughtered Ratchet. I'm gonna tear them apart.
What this did for me, ironically, was make him feel somewhat deeply human.
It doesn't make it your fault, it just makes you human for a change.
As there's undeniably just something incredibly powerful about a version of Optimus Prime who's not the unwavering leader that we expect him to be, but rather a vengeful and flawed one. And to rebuke the criticisms that this was just simply a bad portrayal of the character, the fact that the movie allows us to watch him wrestle with resentment and hatred very much elevated his character, if anything. And I say that because by the time he eventually chooses to protect humanity again,
we're retrieving the seed, but then we're done defending the humans.
It's a very short but extremely powerful moment, as it's a conscious and difficult choice made by a leader who not only didn't have to make it,
I say they get what they deserve,
but also simultaneously saw the absolute worst in humanity and decided to fight for it anyway. Lockdown is the best character in this movie, without a shadow of a doubt. And you know what? There is a case to be made that he's one of the best antagonists in a Transformers film. I still think Sentinel Prime edges it, but when it ultimately boils down to intimidation, I don't really see how anyone beats Lockdown. Look, design,
perfect.
Dialogue,
where do you think you came from? You think you were born? No, you were built. Perfect.
Not to mention his score and sound design coupled together help to make him a genuinely terrifying Transformer whenever he's on screen. I believe something that works in his favor as an antagonist in this movie is the fact that he's neither an Autobot or Decepticon. You see, by stripping away the standard faction dynamic that we're accustomed to, there's an immediate, almost unique sense of danger that comes with that neutrality. Because we know he's motivated by contracts rather than the usual Autobot Decepticon conflicts we've seen throughout the franchise, it gives him this cold, almost Grim Reaper-like feel, where we never feel like our main characters are safe until he's quite literally dead. Anyways, while I think Age of Extinction does more right than it does wrong, I'm well aware it's a deeply flawed movie, but then again, the internet has made that abundantly clear already. It's just that from a personal standpoint, I've always liked this film, regardless of public perception. It's got an amazing soundtrack that I listen to outside of the movie. It somewhat reinvented the wheel whilst feeling like a natural continuation of the previous film, and it introduced us to characters and versions of said characters that were extremely memorable, compelling, and entertaining to watch. So that's why, despite its glaring deficiencies, I'll always admire Transformers Age of Extinction.